morning, and I know you weren't coming ready to be tested, but if you know it's going to be a test, it's not really a test, is it? So it's a quick, some questions that will be on the PowerPoint behind me. 3 quick questions, and they're just guesses for each one, okay? So you haven't got to know the right answer. So turn to the people around you and just take a minute to answer, or try and answer these 3 questions. How many people in the UK will attend church once a year? And we'll go for a percentage on that one. Just once a year for any sort of activity. How many people do you think will come? What percentage will go weekly, every week to church? And lastly, what is the average age of a churchgoer in the UK? Okay? So, spot the statistician who, our resident number checker. I believe it was roughly once. Roughly once. Could anybody with a phone? Tier Fund did the research. If someone could call Tier Fund for me and find out. But we'll go for roughly once. So take a minute, turn to people around you, and see if you can guess. Alrighty, let's see how you got on. Let's see how you got on with that one. For the first question, how many people in the UK will attend church roughly once a year? Who's got a guess on that one? Say 8%, 80%, 80%. Sorry, Kit, I missed yours. 8, so we've got 80, and we've got 8. 20%, 15%, 50%, 50, 55. Feel like it's an auction. Well, according to a Tier Fund bit of research that was done only a few years ago, 1 in 4 people, roughly 25%, will attend church once a year. I love the kind of "I told you so" attitude of some of you then. That was great. If you were right, be generous about it. You can be gracious. It's okay. What about the second one? What percentage of people go weekly? 3%? 4%? This is like an auction now, is it? 3, 4, 7%? Who said that one? Somebody. 20%? Any advances on 20%? No, we think 20% is the maximum. I can tell you that according to this poll, it's 10%. Will go weekly. Some of you encouraged by that. Some of you a little bit undiscouraged. I can tell. This one will be interesting. Number 3. What is the average age of a UK churchgoer? Hang on. Let's go. What did you say, Rose? Late 50s? 50? 60? 55? There's no prize, but I mean, if you're trying to be accurate. Any other guesses? Or is it roughly around that age group? Well, I can tell you by far and away, the biggest group of people in church most weekends will be the over 55s. And on average, the average churchgoer is 61 in the UK. Lots of whispers and, yes, I told you, yes. If we wanted to complete that profile, we could tell you even more. We could tell you that the average Christian churchgoer in the UK would be a woman, a white woman, a middle-class white woman, on average, who's 61 years old. But, did I say that wrong? 61, yes. Yeah. I have to check with figures, because they come and they go out of my head. But the question we're going to be asking over the next few weeks is to do with, what does an average Christian look like? Not in terms of statistics and polls, but by exploring the words of Jesus, and really by returning to his call, to his invitation on our lives. What does he expect to be within my grasp? What does he expect to be within your grasp? What does he promise to each one of us? What is it that he invites us to, that he calls us, each of us, into? The passage that we heard read earlier was from Luke chapter 5. If you want to turn to it, it's on page 1032 in a blue church Bible. 1032. There's some available at the back if you'd like one. But it's Luke chapter 5. And in this chapter, we really meet Mr. Average, a guy called Simon Peter. He's just an average, everyday bloke. He's just been back off a night shift. He's a fisherman. He spent a night on a lake in a boat, and he's caught nothing, which means one of either two things. Either it's been a less than average night, or he's a less than average fisherman. We don't really know which, but either way, he's frustrated, he's tired. And as we saw, if you were here last Sunday for the All Together, there's this strange course of events in which his boat, that's just sat there by the lake, somehow becomes a makeshift pulpit for this cheeky preacher who's in town. And to accommodate the crowds that were there, he needs to go out from the shore and teach. And as he's teaching, Peter is sat there washing his nets. And when this preacher is done, he turns to Peter and he says, I've got this mad idea. Let's go and have a fish. I fancy a go at this. And Peter must have cleared his throat a little bit and said, well, excuse me, I've just washed my nets after a very frustrating night of fishing. The fish won't take bite anyway during the day. They hide from the sunlight. They'll be nice and down and deep. We've tried, we've failed. And then something happens, and we're not really sure what, when Peter says, but if you say so, if you think it'll do any good at all, then I'll put down the nets. And then seconds later, he's hauling in the biggest catch of his life, the biggest capacity his nets have ever seen. They're bursting at the seams, threatening to rip apart, and the other boat's got to come and help them haul it in. And Peter recognizes that he's stood in the presence of more than just the average man. He recognizes Jesus as a prophet, as a holy man. And initially, I think Peter feels rather judged. He feels inferior in the situation, and he's just hit by the weight of who he is. And he falls at Jesus' feet and says, leave me. I can't stand in the presence of this holiness. You're going to have to walk away. And Jesus says these words that he'll say time and time again into Peter and the disciples' lives. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. In the presence of my power, in the presence of my perfection, you don't have to be afraid. From now on, you'll fish for people. And this amazing verse that ends that story, verse 11, it says this. So they pulled up their boats to the shore, left everything, and followed him. Left everything. Nets that were crammed to overflow. Nets that were bursting at the seams, better than average, better than ever nets, worth a fortune nets, every fisherman's dream nets. Peter gets up. He leaves it behind, and he walks away. The first thing that every average Christian needs to know, everything that a Christian is called to, is to pursue Jesus. To walk his way, to pursue his vision for your life, because whatever your dreams are, I promise you he's got more. And to leave it all behind, to trade the best that this world has to offer for the best that Jesus has for you, and to trade the worst that you've ever done for all that Jesus has done for you. A few years ago, the Methodist Church up the road had one of their posters up, and it was a poster that said, is prayer the driving wheel or the spare wheel in your life. And it was a poster that got into the national press and into some other publications, because as somebody was driving round the roundabout reading it, they managed to veer off the road and smash into the church just below the sign. Nobody was hurt, which is why I can tell you that story. But what Jesus offers to Peter here in this moment is not a spare wheel. It's not an insurance policy. It's not another route to take if everything turns bad or goes wrong for him. It's not a little app to download if he needs it. It's not a little like to click on his profile. It's a brand new direction for his future, his potential with Jesus. And I wonder sometimes if what we've done is we've settled for rebranding the product. This is why the T-shirts are here this morning. If you're worried about having money, they'll all be available on eBay, I'm sure. That's a joke. But we've rebranded. We've settled for thinking that the church attendance, if we can get people to come to friendly services regularly, then, hey, we're doing it. We're winning the battle. We're up in our game. We've kind of tried to sell a weekend club membership instead of a heart and life overhaul. We've said to ourselves and to others, look, here's the package. Buy into the brand, adopt the slogan, swallow the soundbite, get the T-shirt, and you're in. What Jesus calls us to is so much more. So much more. So how are we doing when it comes to this? If I can catch up with my PowerPoint. We put together a survey, and thanks to everyone who took the time to fill one in for us. And we're honest enough to take the time to do that. It was fascinating reading, and some of the great stuff was not just what people had ticked, but what people had written as well. So thank you ever so much for doing that. We asked you the first question, how much is this true, how much is it increasingly true, and how much would you like this to be true in your life? What Jesus says makes a difference to my everyday life. Well, 53% of you felt that was true. 39% of us felt that was increasingly true. And 8% of us felt that we would like it to be true. Nobody ticked untrue. The second question was this: since becoming a Christian, I feel I've grown closer to Christ. 61% of us said, yeah, I think that's true. 31% of us said that's increasingly true. And 8% said, I'd love that to be true. I'd love to feel closer to Jesus. And then the third question, and here the results were much more spread out. I feel like I'm becoming more like him in my lifestyle and character. 35 said, yeah, I think that's true. 30% said that's increasingly true. And 35 said, I'd like that to be true. It's interesting, isn't it? I feel like I'm growing closer to Jesus overall. What he's saying is making a difference, but I don't know yet if I can become more like him in my lifestyle and my character. So what does a Jesus-pursuing life look like? What does it look like for you, and what does it look like for me? I don't know if you drove past the CIA yesterday, or if you were down there at all, but there was a major event on there called Comic-Con. If you don't know what Comic-Con is, it's every geeky film, every geeky TV show. They all get together, and the fans share in all kinds of things. A lot of them will turn up dressed up, ready for the day, and they get to meet various characters who've acted those roles over time. I had a look at who was there this year. I recognized about 2 or 3 of them, and so I felt kind of very low down on my geek fest at the moment. But I wonder what it is that you're a fan of in your life, those things that you make time for, those things that you invest in. One question I think we have to ask ourselves is an average Christian a fan of Jesus, a fan of his fame? I don't know about you, but one thing that strikes me about Jesus in this passage, and I'm going to introduce a theological word to us now. One thing that really strikes me is that he's cheeky. You can't read this passage without thinking that Jesus is being cheeky. He's down in Simon Peter's boat before he's been invited. He's requesting in front of a crowd for this to become a makeshift pulpit there and then. Then he's giving advice to experienced fishermen before he's asked for it. And I know that Jesus is the maker and the master of everything. He's Lord of all, so it's all his to begin with. But nobody knows that yet. It must have come across as just cheeky. But there's actually a serious point here, that it's Jesus who invites himself into the boat with us. If you think that's true, that's got huge implications for us. See, a rabbi who's got the spiritual power and prophetic gift to be able to locate fish, the strong temptation must have been to invite him to follow them. I need you on the team. Yeah, I'll follow you. I'll come with you on the Sabbath, as long as you come fishing with us the rest of the week. And I wonder today if there's a sense in which it's more like Jesus is following you than you're following him. See, for Peter, it wasn't a case of trying to squeeze him into the boat somewhere. The boat gets left behind, and Peter pursues a new path for his life. If I'm honest with you today, I'm a fan of all kinds of geeky things that I could bore you to tears with. Ask my wife. She gets it a lot. But they have to fit into my life. Like all of us, we have to make choices. When it gets too costly, when it gets too busy, they have to get squeezed, and choices and decisions have to be made. And then there are things which I've given myself to, things that are non-negotiable, things that I can always find time and energy for. And Jesus isn't building a fan base. He's building a church, a group of disciples that with him and in him and for him can turn a world on its head. Last year I got to fulfill one of my lifelong ambitions. I got to see a guy called Michael W. Smith live in concert. I've been a fan of his since I was a teenager. And as we were queuing up in London to go in, I heard this voice shouting, "John," in a thick northern accent. And being really humble, I thought that must be for me. So I turned round and I saw Gary Smith, who some of you know from Ignite, standing by the door. And he said he didn't know I was going. I said I didn't know he was going. So we were chatting away. And he said, "So are you a fan of Michael W. Smith?" Which is a strange question to ask somebody who'd gone to London. And so I said yes. And he let me rave about him for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then he said, "Well, what do you think of this?" And he pulled out of his pocket 2 backstage passes for Michael W. Smith. Access all areas. And he said, "Wow, what do you think of those?" And in my heart of hearts, I'm thinking, I love you, Gary Smith. I love you. I love you, Gary Smith. He said, "Yeah, they're for me and a friend." But he brought a friend with him, so it was the moment had gone. And it was just thank you for your sympathy. It was devastating, actually. It took a while to get over, but I'm over it now. Thank you for your support and the therapy that this is for me. Are we a fan of his fame? Are we a friend of a friend? One of the interesting things about Peter, and one of the reasons I think so many people love him as one of the disciples, is that he's a kind of a leap before you look kind of a bloke. It's all or nothing with him. And what's fascinating is that for somebody who just lives always on the edge of grace, which he is. I mean, one moment it's revelations from the Father. The next moment it's get behind me, Satan. He lives right on the edge of grace. But that for him, very often the disciples allow Peter to speak for them. There are times when questions are asked and everybody goes quiet and Peter speaks. There's the day of Pentecost. Huge outpouring of the Spirit. The church is birthed and sent and everybody steps back and lets Peter get up. I wonder in your faith if you have others who'll answer for you. If Jesus is somebody that you're comfortable with in a crowd, but not really somebody that you know that you'd call and chat to in a crisis. Not somebody that you'd really spend time with, just the two of you. He's part of a group of friends, but you and him. Sometimes you support his causes. Do you do life together? Do you do things together? Is he your friend? Or a friend of a friend? Another thing that caught my eye this week in the press was a new reality TV show that's been pitched by the makers of Big Brother. It's been called Life on Mars. And they're looking for people to go on a one-way mission to Mars, to set up a colony there and to be filmed in the process. It's a one-way trip. If you apply, then you apply understanding you're going to live the rest of your life on the lonely red planet up in the sky. And what's interesting is that 165,000 people have applied to go to Mars. You're not allowed to send in application forms for other people, so don't even consider that. But they were talking to somebody from the UK, someone called Melissa, who's a taxi driver from Hull, and she said this: the attraction has got to be going down in history, being remembered. Ever since a little child, I wanted to do something where I was going to make my mark on this earth, and this is a way of doing it, by leaving it, interestingly. My parents always used to put me down. They said I'm in cloud cuckoo land and I live on a different planet. Well, if I get on the show, I can say I actually do. On Earth, I feel I've done enough now. I've completed all my challenges that I had in life, and I'll be able to wave down at everyone. I don't think she's quite grasped the distance, but I don't know if they'll ever get that show off the ground. I struggle to, if you pardon the pun, I struggle to believe it's going to happen, if I'm honest. But what does it mean to say to Jesus, I've had enough of doing it my way. I've had enough now of my own agenda. I want to live in you. I want to live with you. I want to get off the ground. I want to be in a different place. I want to be in a different person. In the introduction to the surveys that we gave out, we wrote this, that obviously there's no such thing as an average Christian. Look around. There's no such thing. God designs us all individually. He loves us uniquely. If there was such a thing as an average Christian, who would sign up to be that? Who would want to be Mr. Average Christian or Mrs. Average Christian? We're going to be exploring this theme over the next few weeks, not to create some sort of table of achievers and to put people into camps, far from it, but to challenge us. What do I dream in God? What do I hope for? With God, in God, and for God. See, Jesus says to Peter, follow me, and from now on, you'll fish for people. There's a litmus test there, isn't there? From now on, you'll. The real test is that when all is said and done, is there a from now on in your life? Are there those things that you've been able to leave behind and embrace the things that Jesus has for you? Is there that transformation that you can say, Lord, I want to be less like me and more like you? I was talking to somebody recently, and two of us were sharing faith with this person, a non-Christian. And about halfway through, I listened to myself and what I was saying. And one of the things I think that we were trying to convince this person of is that as Christians, we were normal people. Have you ever done that? You know so-and-so, they're a normal person. I wonder if the problem is that we've spent so long convincing the world that we're normal that they've taken us at our word. When Jesus says to Peter, you're going to fish for people, it's not an average life. And Jesus says to you today and to me, follow me. It's not a normal average life that he calls you to, but a life where you step out into the unknown, hand in hand, led by him. I've written something for us today as a prayer. I've called it a spoken word piece. It's a poem, is what it is. And what it really is a prayer. And I hope it's a prayer for us today. It's called Not a Fan. When people find out I'm a Christian, to them, what does that really mean? Do they think that I'm religious, intellectually outdated, culturally has-been? What do they see when they see me? Easily offended, quickly defensive, a know-it-all freak? Do they see the journey, the longing, the hunger, a seeker, a chaser, a dreamer, a learner? Do they think the Bible is a book that I enjoy like others read Shakespeare or Jane Austen or Tolstoy? Do they think I've got church like they've got their hobbies like spa days or squash clubs or cinemas or shopping? Do they imagine that Jesus is a figure I admire, a spiritual teacher, a historic example? Do they think I'm a fan of his words, of his life, an enthusiast, an expert who's hooked on this guy? Well, I am not. Not a fan, not an obsessive supporter or bold partisan. When I say that I love Jesus, don't imagine that it's equal to lovers of Elvis or iPhones or Starbucks or Star Wars sequels or prequels or sequels of prequels. No, I'm not a fan, not a fanatic or an addict. What I am is a follower, his apprentice, his project. What I want more than anything is to be more like him, not by digging through the history books and reenacting. See, if his tomb lay empty on that first Easter day, if his dead, broken body just got up and walked away, if he took on death and left it in its wake, if blood flowed through cold veins and his dead heart beat again, then he is alive forever. And his love conquers all. I don't have to find him in old books or strange ritual, but his resurrection, his real risen life can flow through me and renew me and make me alive. Don't think I'm a believer because I liked it when I tried it. Once you've seen the truth, you can't just choose to deny it. And it's not always the case, though I long it to be, that when you see my face, it's his grace that you see. So I'm not a fan or a friend of a friend. His presence is my breath. On him I depend. I'm not a fan or a friend of a friend. What I am is a follower, side by side, till the end. Let's pray together. Let's just take a moment in the safety of this place, in the stillness of his presence, just to ask him to speak to us today about where we're at, about where we're headed. And if there's a sense in which you feel like you've been a fan or a friend of a friend, and you want to take a step today to say, I want to follow you. I want to pursue your vision for my life with all that I have. Then just reach out to him in this moment. The amazing thing about Jesus is that he stands before each one of us and says, don't be afraid. And Lord Jesus, we thank you today that just like you can peer beneath the surface of an ocean, that you can peer beneath the surface of us today. And I thank you, Lord, that you can see our hearts. I pray for all of us today who would love it to be true that we're growing more like you. Lord, would you help us in that desire? Would you help us, Lord, to hope, to dream, to pray, and to work to be more like you? Help us, Lord, where the pursuit has lost its passion, has lost its energy. Would you renew and refresh us today? And would you lead us deeper into you? I pray, Lord, that you'd lead us closer to a life that is all about you, as we seek to surrender to your ways.